Get out of this seat! You do not belong here!
You just ended your own career.
Sir, you need to step out of that seat before this becomes embarrassing. The words cut through the private jet cabin before the engines had even started. Ethan Brooks looked up slowly from his tablet. He was sitting beside the window in a black hoodie, dark jeans, and worn gray sneakers. A leather bag rested on the seat beside him. His face was calm, but the silence around him changed. The woman standing over him did not lower her voice. "This section is reserved," she said. "You cannot just walk onto a private aircraft and sit wherever you want." 2 rows back, an older couple stopped reading their newspapers. Near the galley, a young flight attendant froze with a stack of linen napkins in her hands. Ethan did not move. That was what made Melissa Carter angrier. She had been a senior flight attendant for more than a decade. She knew how to smile for wealthy men in tailored suits. She knew how to pour champagne without spilling a drop. She knew how to remember favorite drinks, preferred blankets, and which clients wanted silence. But when she saw Ethan Brooks step onto the Gulfstream that morning, alone, quiet, dressed like a man who might have taken the wrong shuttle, something in her mind closed before he even spoke. It was just after sunrise at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. The sky outside the private terminal was pale blue with a thin orange edge. Ground crews moved across the tarmac in bright vests. The air smelled of cold asphalt, jet fuel, and morning coffee. Ethan had arrived without an assistant. No driver holding a sign, no entourage, no polished shoes clicking behind him. Just a man carrying his own bag. To Melissa, that told a story. To Ethan, it told the truth. He had built his life that way. Quietly, deliberately, without asking strangers to approve of him. At 54, Ethan Brooks was the founder of Brooks Global Holdings, a private investment and logistics company with offices in 6 states. His businesses moved medical equipment, emergency supplies, aircraft parts, and commercial freight across the country. His name was on contracts worth more money than most people would ever see. But very few people recognized his face. That was not an accident. Ethan had learned young that attention could become a cage. He grew up outside Baltimore, raised by a mother who worked nights at a hospital and still found time to iron his school shirts before dawn. She taught him 2 things. Keep your word. Watch how people treat those they think they do not need. That lesson stayed with him longer than any business degree. So he kept his life simple when he could. He wore hoodies on travel days. He carried his own bags. He said thank you to janitors, gate agents, drivers, and waitresses by name whenever he could read a badge. He believed small moments revealed large truths. That morning, the truth walked toward him in a pressed Navy uniform and a tight smile. Melissa Carter had not checked the manifest. She had not read the client profile. She had not noticed the tail number on the aircraft matched the name of Ethan's company. She saw a black man in a hoodie sitting in the owner's seat, and she decided the story before she knew the facts. "May I see your confirmation?" she asked. Her words were polite. Her tone was not. Ethan unlocked his phone and held it up. The screen showed the charter details. His name, the flight time, the aircraft, the destination. Everything she needed was right there. Melissa glanced at it for less than a second. "This only shows a booking," she said. "It does not prove you belong in this seat." The cabin went still. Ethan studied her face. Not with anger. Not yet. With the kind of patience that comes from surviving rooms where people underestimated you and then expected you to stay grateful. "I am exactly where I am supposed to be," he said. His voice was low, steady, almost gentle. That gentleness bothered her more than shouting would have. Outside, a fuel truck rumbled past the window. Inside, the young attendant by the galley lowered her eyes, pretending not to hear. Ethan placed his phone face down on the armrest and returned to his tablet. Melissa's jaw tightened. She had expected apology, confusion, compliance. Instead, she got silence. And in that silence, she felt her authority slipping. She looked at the leather bag beside him. Then she reached for it. Ethan's eyes lifted. "Do not touch my bag," he said. Melissa's hand stopped an inch above the handle. For the first time that morning, something flickered across her face. Not doubt. Defiance. and the quiet cabin seemed to hold its breath. Melissa lowered her hand, but she did not step back. For a moment, the only sound inside the cabin was the soft hum of the ventilation system and the distant beep of a service cart outside on the tarmac. Ethan could hear her breathing, short, tight, controlled only on the surface. "I am trying to help you avoid a problem," she said. "No," Ethan replied. "You are creating one." The words landed cleanly. Near the galley, Olivia Bennett looked down at the napkins in her hands. Her fingers had gone stiff around the folded linen. She was 27, still new enough to believe rules meant what the training manuals said they meant. Respect every passenger. Verify before escalating. Never touch personal property without permission. But training manuals did not prepare her for Melissa Carter. Melissa had seniority. Melissa had friends in scheduling. Melissa knew which supervisors answered her calls. Olivia had seen another junior attendant lose her preferred routes after disagreeing with Melissa over something small. A meal order. A seating note. Nothing that should have ruined a person's month, but it did. So Olivia stood still and hated herself for it. Melissa looked at Ethan's bag again, her lips pressed into a hard line. "Sir, this aircraft is managed under private charter procedures," she said. "We have security standards." "I understand security standards," Ethan said. His eyes did not leave hers. "Then you understand why I need you to cooperate. I have cooperated. I showed you the confirmation. You chose not to read it." A faint flush climbed Melissa's neck. The older man 2 rows back lowered his newspaper completely now. His wife placed one hand over his wrist, a silent warning not to get involved. People over 60 knew that look. The look that said trouble had already entered the room and was searching for a witness. Melissa turned slightly, performing for the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. We are just verifying a passenger issue before departure." Ethan watched her change, voice softer, posture straighter, smile almost professional. It was not service, it was theater. "No one is being delayed because of me," Ethan said. Melissa snapped her gaze back to him. "You do not get to decide that. And you do not get to accuse a passenger because you failed to check your list." Olivia's eyes lifted. That was the truth. Simple, plain, uncomfortable. Melissa took one step closer to Ethan's seat. Her polished heels sank lightly into the cream carpet. "I am going to ask you one more time," she said. "Move to the rear lounge while we verify your status." Ethan looked past her toward the empty cabin behind him. The rear lounge was not a penalty in itself. It had leather seating, a small bar, and a screen built into the wall. But that was not the point. The point was being moved because someone decided his presence needed an explanation. He had spent his whole life recognizing that moment. In restaurants where the host asked if he was waiting for the delivery entrance. In hotel lobbies where security asked whose guest he was. In boardrooms where men shook hands with his white attorney first, then asked Ethan if he was part of the support team. Each time, he had chosen patience because patience kept doors open. But patience was not the same as surrender. "I am not moving," he said. Melissa stared at him. The cabin seemed smaller now, the air heavier. She leaned closer, lowering her voice enough to sound private, but not enough to hide the threat. "You are making yourself look very suspicious." Ethan slowly removed his glasses and set them on the armrest. "No, Miss Carter," he said. "You are revealing what you already believed." Her face changed, just a flicker. But Ethan saw it. Olivia saw it too. Melissa reached for the tablet clipped to her belt and tapped hard against the screen. "I am calling ground operations," she said. "Do that," Ethan said, "and ask them to verify the owner on file." Her thumb paused, only for half a second. Then pride took over. She pressed the call button near the galley wall. "Ground ops, this is Senior Attendant Carter on the Brooks Charter," she said, her voice suddenly tight and official. "We have a passenger refusing crew instructions in the owner's cabin. I need immediate assistance at the aircraft." Olivia's stomach dropped. Ethan did not move. He only looked out the window, where the sunrise had climbed higher over the wing. His reflection stared back from the glass. Calm face, tired eyes. He thought of his mother then. Not the tired woman folding hospital sheets after midnight. The strong one. The one who once told him, "Baby, Never let someone else's blindness make you forget who you are. Ethan picked up his phone from the armrest and placed its screen down in his palm. The recording had already been running for 7 minutes. Melissa released the call button and turned back toward Ethan with the expression of someone who believed the room had already chosen her side. But the room had not chosen. It had only gone quiet. Olivia stood at the galley entrance with her pulse tapping in her throat. She wanted to step forward. She wanted to say, "Wait, he showed you the confirmation. You did not check it." But fear held her in place like a hand on her shoulder. Melissa noticed her watching. "Olivia," she said sharply, "prepare the rear lounge." Olivia blinked. "For what?" Melissa's eyes narrowed. "For the passenger." The word passenger came out like an insult. Ethan looked up from his seat. "I told you. I am not relocating." Melissa gave a short laugh. No warmth, no humor. "You really think sitting there quietly makes you look innocent?" "I do not need to look innocent," Ethan said. "I am a paying client on my own charter." The older woman 2 rows back shifted in her seat. Her husband whispered, "Maybe we should let them handle it." She whispered back, "Maybe handling it is how things like this keep happening." That small sentence moved through the cabin like a match struck in the dark. Melissa heard it. Her jaw tightened again. She stepped closer to Ethan's row and pointed toward the back of the aircraft. "Sir, you will move now, or security will remove you." "That is not a suggestion." Ethan's face remained steady, but inside him something old stirred. Not rage, something quieter, warier. He had spent decades teaching younger employees how to survive rooms where people judged them before they had spoken. He told them to breathe first, document second, decide third. Never let anyone force you into becoming the person they already accused you of being. Now he was living his own lesson. He placed his tablet on the side table. "Miss Carter," he said, "I would like to speak with the captain." Melissa's face hardened. "You do not give orders on this aircraft." "No," Ethan said, "but I do have the right to request the captain when a crew member is escalating a situation without cause. That is not how this works. It is exactly how responsible aviation works." The words struck her harder than he expected. Melissa moved fast. She reached down and grabbed the handle of Ethan's leather bag. Olivia gasped before she could stop herself. Ethan rose from his seat. He did not lunge. He did not shout. He simply stood. At 6'2", Ethan filled the narrow aisle in a way he had not when seated. The hoodie no longer made him look small. His shoulders squared. His voice dropped lower. "Put the bag down." Melissa froze with the bag halfway off the seat. For one breath, the cabin held still. Outside, a ground crewman walked past the oval window, unaware of the storm forming inside the quiet jet. Melissa looked at Ethan's hand. It was open, empty, calm at his side. Still, she stepped back as if he had threatened her. "Do not intimidate me," she said. "I am asking you not to take my property." You stood up aggressively. "I stood up because you grabbed my bag." Olivia looked from one face to the other. She could see the story being built in real time. Melissa was choosing words that sounded official, aggressively, intimidate, non-compliant, words that could follow a man into a report, into a database, into a police statement. Words that could become a cage. The older woman pressed her lips together. She knew it too. Melissa dropped the bag, not placed, dropped. It hit the carpeted floor with a heavy thud. The sound was soft, but it felt violent. Ethan looked down at it, then back at her. There was pain in his face now. Not from the bag, from the disrespect, from the old familiar message that his things, his presence, his dignity, could be handled carelessly if someone decided he did not belong. Melissa lifted her chin. "You should be grateful I am giving you a chance to resolve this quietly." Ethan bent, picked up the bag, and returned it to the seat beside him. Then he sat down, slowly, deliberately. "You had that chance," he said. Melissa's eyes flashed. A crackle came from the intercom panel. "Senior Attendant Carter, ground security is approaching the aircraft." Her shoulders relaxed. She thought help was coming. Ethan looked at his phone, still recording in his hand. He knew something else was coming too. The truth. The first security officer appeared at the cabin door, with one hand resting near his radio, and the other gripping the rail. He was not young. His hair was gray at the temples, and his face had the tired calm of a man who had seen too many small problems become large ones, because someone needed to win. His name badge read Sullivan. Behind him came a younger officer, broad-shouldered, alert, eyes moving quickly through the cabin. Melissa met them before they could step fully inside. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice trembling just enough to sound injured. "The passenger in the owner's cabin is refusing instructions." He became confrontational when I tried to verify him. Officer Sullivan looked past her. Ethan sat by the window, hands visible, posture relaxed, leather bag beside him. Nothing about him looked loud. Nothing looked dangerous. But Sullivan knew better than to trust appearances in either direction. "What happened exactly?" he asked. Melissa swallowed. He would not move. He challenged my authority. When I tried to secure the cabin, he stood up over me and reached toward me. Olivia's stomach turned. That was not what happened, not even close. The younger officer shifted his weight. "Did he touch you?" Melissa hesitated. "1 second. Too long. He made me feel unsafe," she said. It was a careful sentence, soft enough to be hard to challenge, serious enough to move the machinery of security. Ethan heard it and looked down at his hands. He knew that sentence. He had heard versions of it before. Not always about him. Sometimes about men he mentored. Sometimes about employees who came to his office, angry, ashamed, and afraid, because someone had turned their calm refusal into a threat. He had spent years telling them they deserved to be seen accurately. Now he was waiting to see if anyone in that cabin would see him accurately. Sullivan stepped toward him. "Sir, I'm Officer Sullivan with Teterboro Ground Security. I need to ask you a few questions." Ethan nodded. "Of course. May I see your identification?" Ethan reached slowly into his back pocket. Every movement was measured, visible. He opened his wallet and handed over his driver's license. Sullivan glanced at it, then glanced again. Ethan Brooks. The name meant something, but he did not show it right away. Good officers learn to keep their faces quiet until the facts caught up. "Do you have your charter confirmation?" Ethan held up his phone. "Yes." Melissa cut in. "He already showed me a booking screen. That does not prove he belongs in that seat." Sullivan looked at her. "Mom, I'll verify it." Her lips pressed together. The younger officer watched Ethan's phone. His eyes paused for a moment on the aircraft details, the company name, the tail number. Brooks Global Aviation Services. A quiet change passed across his face. Sullivan keyed his radio and turned slightly toward the galley. "Ops, this is Sullivan at the Brooks Charter. I need client verification on the aircraft currently staged for Savannah. Confirm principal, passenger, and owner registration." Static answered first. Then silence. The cabin waited. Olivia could hear her own heartbeat. She could hear Melissa breathing. She could hear the faint clink of ice settling in a glass somewhere near the galley. Then the radio crackled. Confirmed. Aircraft registered under Brooks Global Holdings. Principal passenger is Ethan Brooks. Owner on file. Sole charter client for this departure. No one moved. The words seemed to hang under the ceiling lights. Owner on file. Sole charter client. Melissa's face lost its color so quickly it looked almost painful. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. The older woman 2 rows back closed her eyes for a moment, not in satisfaction, but in sadness. She had lived long enough to know that being proven right did not always feel good. Sometimes it only proved how much damage had nearly been done. Sullivan lowered his radio. He turned to Ethan. His voice changed, not dramatic, not theatrical, just human. "Mr. Brooks, I apologize for the disruption." Ethan looked at him for a long second. He appreciated the apology. He also knew it was not enough. Apologies were often the first clean towel thrown over a spill no one wanted to examine. He spoke quietly. "I need this incident documented accurately." Sullivan nodded. "It will be." Melissa found her voice at last. "Wait, there has been a misunderstanding." Ethan turned his head toward her. "No," he said. "There has been an assumption." The sentence hit harder because he did not raise his voice. Melissa looked at Sullivan, then the younger officer, then Olivia. She was searching for a way back. A safer version of the morning. A version where she had only been cautious, only following procedure, only protecting the flight. But everyone had heard her. Everyone had seen enough. And Olivia, still standing by the galley, knew the moment had come for her to decide who she was going to be. Olivia felt the words rise in her throat before she was ready for them. I saw what happened. Her voice was small at first, almost swallowed by the soft mechanical hum of the cabin. But it was enough. Every face turned toward her. Melissa's head snapped around. Olivia, just her name, one word. A warning wrapped in ice. Olivia's hands were trembling. The folded linen napkins shifted in her grip, and one slipped to the floor. She looked down at it, then back up. Something inside her settled. Not confidence. Not courage, exactly. More like the quiet realization that silence was no longer protecting anyone. Not Ethan. Not her. Not the truth. Officer Sullivan turned toward her. "Mom, what did you see?" Melissa stepped forward. She is junior crew. She does not understand the full context. Olivia looked at Melissa, and for the first time that morning, she did not look away. "I understand what I saw." The cabin went still again. Ethan watched her carefully. He knew how much this cost. Power was not always loud. Sometimes it sat in a uniform with seniority. Sometimes it lived in scheduling decisions, bad references, quiet retaliation. He had seen people lose opportunities for telling the truth at the wrong time to the wrong person. Olivia swallowed. "Mr. Brooks was seated when Miss Carter approached him," she said. He showed her his confirmation on his phone. She barely looked at it. Then she told him he did not belong in the owner's cabin. Melissa's face tightened. "That is not accurate." "It is," Olivia said. The words came stronger now. She told him to move to the rear lounge. He refused, calmly. Then she reached for his bag without permission. The younger officer glanced at Melissa. Sullivan did not interrupt. He had his notebook out now, pen moving across the page. Olivia's breath shook. She kept going. When Mr. Brooks stood up, he told her to put the bag down. He did not threaten her. He did not touch her. She dropped the bag on the floor. Melissa's eyes flashed with anger. "You need to stop talking." Sullivan's voice cut in. "No, Miss Carter. She needs to finish." That was the first time Olivia felt the floor under her feet again. She looked toward Ethan. He gave the smallest nod. Not permission. Gratitude. Olivia's eyes stung, but she held herself together. She called ground security and said he was refusing instructions. But the situation only escalated because she would not verify his identity properly. She made assumptions. She treated him differently from the moment he boarded. The older woman 2 rows back spoke quietly. "That is what I saw too." Her husband closed his eyes. He looked ashamed now, not because he had done anything cruel, but because he had nearly chosen comfort over conscience. Melissa turned on the woman. "Mom, please stay out of crew matters." The woman's chin lifted. Her voice was soft but steady. "I am in my 70s, Miss Carter. I know the difference between safety and humiliation." Those words landed with a force no one expected. Melissa's control cracked. "This is outrageous," she said. "I was following procedure. I have a responsibility to protect this aircraft." Ethan finally spoke. "You had a responsibility to protect every person on it, including me." The cabin absorbed that sentence. It was not dramatic. It was not angry. It was the kind of truth that made people look inward before they looked away. A sound came from the cockpit door. The latch clicked. Captain Michael Reed stepped into the cabin with his headset still around his neck. He was 58, tall, clean-shaven, with tired blue eyes, and the posture of a man who had spent his adult life making calm decisions in pressurized rooms. He looked from Sullivan to Melissa, then to Ethan. "What is going on in my cabin?" No one answered at first. Then Sullivan stepped close and gave him the short version. "Client verified, owner on file, crew dispute statement, possible false report." With every phrase, Captain Reed's expression changed, not quickly, slowly, precisely, like a door closing 1 inch at a time. When Sullivan finished, Reed turned to Melissa. "Is this accurate?" Melissa opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "Captain, I believed there was a legitimate security concern." Reed looked toward Olivia. "Did Mr. Brooks threaten her?" Olivia shook her head. "No, sir." "Did he touch her?" "No, sir." "Did she verify the manifest before escalating?" Olivia hesitated. Then she answered, "No, sir." Reed exhaled through his nose. It was not anger yet. It was disappointment, heavier than anger. Melissa tried to recover. "Captain, with respect, I made a judgment call." Reed's voice dropped. A judgment call begins with facts. Melissa went pale. He straightened. Miss Carter, you are relieved of duty for this flight effective immediately. Gather your personal belongings and airplane. The words were calm, final. Melissa stared at him like he had spoken in another language. Captain, you cannot be serious. I am. Her eyes darted around the cabin, searching for support. She found none. Not from Sullivan. Not from Olivia. Not from the elderly couple. Not from Ethan, who sat quietly with his hands folded. For the first time all morning, Melissa looked small. Not because she had lost authority. Because everyone could finally see what she had done with it. Melissa did not move at first. Her hand tightened around the edge of the galley wall. For a second, it looked as if she might argue, might force Captain Reed to say it again in front of everyone. But then she saw his face. There was no softness there. No room left for performance. Captain, she said, her voice thin, I have given this company 12 years. Reed did not blink. Then you should know our standards better than anyone. That sentence took the last of the air out of her. Olivia watched Melissa walk into the galley and snatch her purse from a storage drawer. The zipper caught. Melissa tugged too hard, and the sound ripped through the cabin like fabric tearing. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear alone, from humiliation, from losing control in a space where she had always known how to control others. Sullivan stood near the door, waiting. The younger officer stepped aside so she could pass. Melissa stopped beside Ethan's row. For one strange moment, no one breathed. She looked at him with wet eyes and a mouth set hard enough to hide panic. This could have been avoided, she said. Ethan lifted his gaze. Yes, he said. It could have. There was no cruelty in his voice. That made it worse for her. If he had yelled, she could have called him angry. If he had cursed, she could have called him hostile. But his calm left her nowhere to hide. Melissa turned and walked toward the cabin door. Her heels sounded different now. Earlier they had clicked like authority. Now they stumbled against the polished floor in uneven beats. At the top of the air stairs, she paused as if waiting for someone to stop her. No one did. The morning wind moved across the open doorway. Cold air slipped into the cabin. Melissa stepped outside and Sullivan followed her down. The door closed behind them. The seal hissed. Only then did the cabin breathe again. Captain Reed stood still for a moment, then turned to Ethan. His voice softened. Mr. Brooks, I am deeply sorry. I should have been aware of the situation sooner. Ethan looked toward the closed door. I know you have procedures, Captain. What happened here was not a procedure problem. It was a people problem. Reed nodded slowly. That landed. He had flown long enough to understand that checklists could protect engines, weather routes, fuel loads, and emergency systems. But they could not protect dignity unless people chose to. I will file a report before we depart, Reed said. A full one. I appreciate that, Ethan replied. But I will be filing my own. Olivia lowered her eyes. Fear returned quickly after courage. It always did. She had spoken up, but now came the part where consequences lived. She imagined Melissa calling managers. She imagined lost routes, cold shoulders, a note in her file that never said retaliation but felt exactly like it. Ethan saw her standing there, folded into herself. Olivia, he said. She looked up. Her face was pale. Yes, Mr. Brooks, thank you. 2 simple words. Her mouth trembled. I should have said something sooner. Ethan shook his head. Fear makes good people quiet. What matters is what they do when the moment finally asks them to choose. Olivia pressed her lips together, but tears still gathered in her eyes. The older woman 2 rows back spoke gently. Young lady, you did the right thing. Her husband looked at Olivia, then at Ethan. Shame had softened his face. I should have said something too, he admitted. I saw enough. Ethan nodded once. Most people do. No accusation, no bitterness, just truth. That made the cabin heavier than anger would have. Captain Reed cleared his throat and looked toward Olivia. Ms. Bennett, can you continue service for this flight? Olivia wiped one tear quickly with the back of her hand. She straightened her shoulders. Yes, Captain. Her voice was not strong yet, but it was hers. The captain returned to the cockpit. The younger officer finished taking brief statements, then left the aircraft. Outside, ground crews resumed their work as if nothing had happened. A fuel hose was disconnected. A worker in a yellow vest gave a thumbs up. The world outside kept moving. Inside, everything had changed. Ethan picked up his phone. The recording was still running. The timer glowed against the dark screen. He stopped it. Then he sat back and closed his eyes for a moment. Not because he was tired of fighting. Because he knew the fight had just begun. The jet lifted off at 7:22 in the morning, smooth and quiet, as if the runway had released it with a sigh. Below them, New Jersey folded into gray roads, silver rooftops, and thin rivers of traffic. Above them, the clouds opened into clean blue light. Inside the cabin, the air felt different now. Not peaceful, not yet. More like a room after a storm when broken branches still lie in the yard, and everyone pretends not to see them. Olivia brought Ethan a cup of coffee with both hands. "Black coffee, sir," she said softly. "No sugar, no cream." Ethan looked up. "You remembered." She nodded. It was in the client notes. A small sadness moved through his face. So the notes were there. Olivia understood what he meant. The information had always been available. Melissa had simply chosen not to look. "Yes, sir," Olivia said. They were there. Ethan accepted the cup. His fingers brushed the warm porcelain. "Thank you." Olivia hesitated and spoke before fear could take the words away. "Mr. Brooks, I am sorry. Not just for what happened, for standing there so long." Ethan set the cup down. His voice softened. "Olivia, you are not responsible for Melissa's choices. But I almost let them become the official story." That sentence hung between them. It was honest, painfully so. Ethan leaned back in his seat. For the first time that morning, his expression carried something close to tenderness. "My mother used to say the truth does not always need a hero. Sometimes it just needs one person to stop abandoning it." Olivia looked down. One tear slipped free, and she wiped it away quickly. "I do not know what happens to my job now." "You told the truth," Ethan said. "That should not cost you your livelihood." She gave a small, bitter smile. Should not and does not are different things. Ethan respected that answer. It had the weight of someone learning the real world faster than she deserved. After she returned to the galley, Ethan picked up his phone and stared at the recording file. The screen showed the length. More than 12 minutes. Long enough to capture everything that mattered. Long enough to prevent a lie from growing legs. He hated that proof had become necessary. He hated it for himself. He hated it more for people who did not own the plane, who did not have lawyers on speed dial, who did not have a company with their name on the charter documents. He tapped a contact. David Morgan answered on the second ring. "Ethan," David said, voice rough with early morning. "You are never calling this early unless something happened." It did. David went quiet. Ethan told him everything. The tone, the bag, the false security call. Olivia's statement, the verification. Melissa being removed. He did not exaggerate. He did not decorate. He gave facts in order, the way men like him learned to speak when emotion could be used against them. David listened without interrupting. When Ethan finished, there was a long silence. Then David said, "Do you have evidence?" "Yes. Audio and video. From the moment she approached me." "Good." The word was sharp. Not happy. Prepared. "I want a formal record," Ethan said. "I want the security report. I want the captain's report. I want Olivia protected. And I want Brooks Global to review every contract we hold with that management company." David exhaled slowly. That contract is worth a lot of money. So is dignity. David did not argue. He had known Ethan for nearly 15 years. He had watched him walk away from insults that would have broken other men. He had watched Ethan choose peace because the fight was too small or too public or too costly for employees depending on him. But this was different. This happened on Ethan's aircraft, under Ethan's contract. Inside a system he had paid to trust. David's voice changed. It became precise. "I will send a preservation letter within the hour. They are not to delete records, radio logs, personnel files, or internal communications. Then I will request the full incident file. After that, we decide whether this stays private." Ethan looked out the window. Sunlight ran along the wing like a blade. "It will not stay private if they try to bury it." David paused. "And if they offer money?" Ethan's eyes stayed on the sky. "This is not for sale." In the galley, Olivia stood very still, hearing only pieces of the call. Not enough to know the plan. Enough to feel the direction of it. For the first time since Melissa stepped off the plane, she allowed herself to breathe. Because maybe truth had found someone powerful enough to carry it. And maybe, just maybe, it would not be buried this time. By the time Ethan landed in Savannah, the first letter had already reached the inbox of everyone who mattered. It was not loud. It was not emotional. It was worse than that. It was precise. David Morgan's letter went to the legal department of Meridian Lux Aviation, the private aviation management company that handled Ethan's aircraft. It also went to the chief executive, the head of operations, human resources, and the outside counsel listed on their corporate filings. Preserve all records. Produce all reports. Identify all personnel involved. Confirm steps taken to protect witness Olivia Bennett from retaliation. The last line was the one that made the company's general counsel sit back in his chair and stop breathing for a moment. Brooks Global Holdings is reviewing all aviation management agreements currently held with Meridian Lux Aviation. That was not a complaint. That was a warning flare. In Manhattan, Daniel Price, chief executive of Meridian Lux, was halfway through a breakfast meeting when his assistant stepped into the room and placed a tablet beside his coffee cup. "You need to read this now," she whispered. Daniel Price was 61, polished, cautious, and proud of the brand he had spent 20 years building. Meridian Lux sold discretion, comfort, flawless service, the kind of service wealthy clients paid for because they did not want surprises. He opened the letter. His face changed before he reached the bottom. Across the table, a board member stopped cutting into his omelet. "Dan?" Daniel did not answer. He opened the attachment. The video began inside the cream-colored cabin of Ethan Brooks's Gulfstream. Melissa Carter's voice came through the tablet speakers, clipped and cold. "You cannot just walk onto a private aircraft and sit wherever you want." Daniel's hand tightened around the tablet. The room went quiet. They listened to the confirmation being shown. They heard Melissa dismiss it. They heard Ethan ask her not to touch his bag. They heard her call ground operations. They heard the words refusing crew instructions, spoken in a tone that now sounded less like safety and more like strategy. When Olivia's voice came through near the end, soft but steady, Daniel closed his eyes. "I saw what happened." That sentence ruined every defense his company might have tried to build. Because it was simple. Because it was witnessed. Because it sounded true. Daniel pushed back from the table. "Cancel the rest of my morning," he said. His assistant was already typing. Within the hour, Meridian's legal team gathered in a glass conference room overlooking Midtown. No one sat comfortably. The recording played again, this time on a large screen. Every pause felt longer. Every word felt heavier. The head of Human Resources, Janet Cole, looked pale. "We need Melissa Carter's full file," Daniel said. Janet hesitated. That hesitation told him something. "What am I going to find?" he asked. She looked down at her notes. There were prior complaints. Daniel stared at her. "How many?" 3 formal passenger complaints in the last 2 years. 2 involved black clients. 1 involved a Latino family. The room went silent. Daniel's voice dropped. "And why am I hearing about this for the first time today?" Janet swallowed. "They were closed by Regional Service Management." "Who closed them?" "Harold Whitman." The name landed like a stone. Harold Whitman was a middle manager with a talent for making problems disappear. He was efficient, loyal, popular with executives because his reports were always tidy. Too tidy. Daniel looked at the paused image on the screen. Ethan Brooks sitting calmly by the window while Melissa stood over him. That image would not stay inside the company if they mishandled this. But deeper than fear was something more painful. Recognition. This was not one bad morning. It was a system protecting itself until the wrong client had proof. Daniel stood. Place Melissa Carter on immediate suspension pending investigation. Place Harold Whitman on administrative leave. Pull every discrimination complaint from the past 5 years. Not summaries, full files. Janet nodded quickly. "And Olivia Bennett?" the general counsel asked. Daniel turned toward him. "No retaliation. Written protection. Today, if anyone touches her schedule, her routes, or her file without legal approval, they are gone. For the first time that morning, someone in the room exhaled. In Savannah, Ethan stepped off the jet into warm Georgia air. His meeting car waited near the terminal, engine running. Olivia stood near the cabin door, unsure whether to speak. Ethan paused at the top of the stairs. "You did not just help me today," he said. "You helped the next person they might not have believed." Olivia's eyes filled again. This time, she did not wipe the tears away. Ethan descended the stairs slowly, phone in hand, shoulders steady beneath the plain black hoodie. Behind him, a company that had mistaken quiet for weakness was beginning to shake. Melissa Carter received the suspension notice in a small conference room at Teterboro, with a paper cup of coffee cooling untouched beside her. A human resources representative sat across from her. A legal observer sat beside him. Neither one smiled. "Pending the outcome of the investigation, you are not permitted to contact clients, crew members, or company witnesses," the representative said. Melissa stared at the printed notice. "Company witnesses." The words burned. "You mean Olivia," she said. The legal observer looked up. "We are not discussing witness identities." Melissa laughed once. Dry, bitter. "She has been waiting for this. She never liked me." No one responded. That silence made her angrier than an argument would have. For the first time in years, Melissa could feel the floor moving beneath her career. She had always known how to survive complaints. Deny too much emotion. Use the word safety. Say the passenger was difficult. Let management close the file. It had worked before. That was the terrible truth. It had worked because the people complaining had been ordinary clients, without recordings, without corporate leverage, without a legal team sending preservation letters before lunch. But Ethan Brooks was not ordinary. By late afternoon, Meridian Lux had already pulled Melissa's personnel file. The clean version looked manageable. Strong service history, high-profile charters, occasional conflicts, no formal discipline. Then David Morgan requested the full archive. That was where the buried things lived. Emails, internal notes, complaint summaries, private messages between regional managers. One complaint came from a black cardiologist from Atlanta who said Melissa questioned his presence on a medical charter 3 times, even after he showed identification. Closed as misunderstanding. Another came from a Latino family traveling for a funeral. They said Melissa asked if they were staff before realizing they were clients. Closed as insufficient evidence. A third came from a retired Army colonel, a black man in his late 60s, who wrote one sentence the investigator never forgot. "She looked at me like my dignity needed paperwork." That complaint had also been closed. Same manager, Harold Whitman. Daniel Price read the files in his office after sunset, the city glowing behind him. With every page, his face grew heavier. Not because he feared a lawsuit, though he did. Not because a major client might walk away, though that was likely. Because the pattern was no longer deniable. His company had been warned, and it had chosen comfort. Janet Cole stood near his desk with a folder pressed to her chest. "Do you want to pause the internal review until outside counsel advises?" she asked. Daniel looked up slowly. "No, that is how we got here." She nodded, but her eyes were tired. She had signed some of those closure summaries. Not all. Enough. She had told herself the evidence was thin. She had told herself service conflicts happened. She had told herself bias was hard to prove. Now the recording from Ethan's jet sat on the desk between them like a mirror. "Janet," Daniel said quietly, "how many people did we train to stay silent?" She did not answer. She did not have to. In Savannah, Ethan finished the acquisition meeting shortly after 4 in the afternoon. He signed the final documents in a glass boardroom overlooking the river. Everyone congratulated him. Hands were shaken. Photos were offered. Champagne was poured. Ethan smiled when appropriate, but his mind was still in the cabin. Not with Melissa. With Olivia. With the older woman who spoke up late. With the retired colonel whose complaint had disappeared into a file no one wanted to open. After the meeting, Ethan stepped outside alone. Warm air moved off the Savannah River. A street musician played a slow blues melody near the corner, the notes bending through the afternoon like memory. His phone rang. "David." "They found prior complaints," David said. Ethan closed his eyes. "How many?" "Enough to show a pattern. A long pause followed. Ethan watched two elderly tourists walk hand in hand along the riverfront. The man moved slowly, and the woman matched his pace without comment. Care looked like that sometimes, not grand, just refusing to leave someone behind. Ethan opened his eyes. "Then this is bigger than me." "Yes," David said. "It is. Prepare the contract termination review." David was quiet for a moment. That will hit them hard. They should have thought about that when the first complaint came in. His voice was calm, too calm. David knew that tone. It meant Ethan had moved past injury into principle. "What do you want from them?" David asked. Ethan looked out at the river. Truth. Protection for Olivia. A public acknowledgement. A third-party audit. Mandatory bias training from people who understand the damage, not consultants selling slides. And money? Ethan's answer came without hesitation. "Not for me." Back at Meridian Lux, Daniel Price read the demand letter after dark. This time, he did not ask how to make it go away. He asked how much of it was true. And the most frightening part was that he already knew the answer. 3 days later, Meridian Lux Aviation made its decisions public. Not with a polished video. Not with soft music or smiling executives. Just a written statement, sent first to Ethan Brooks and his attorney, then to every employee in the company. Melissa Carter was terminated for misconduct, misuse of crew authority, and filing an inaccurate security report. Harold Whitman was terminated for mishandling prior discrimination complaints. Meridian Lux would submit to an independent civil rights audit, revise its complaint process, and require bias training for every employee, from cabin crew to senior leadership. Daniel Price read the statement aloud in a company meeting that Friday morning. His voice was steady, but his hands rested flat on the podium, as if he needed it to hold himself upright. "We failed our client," he said. "But more than that, we failed our own standards. We treated warning signs like paperwork. We allowed silence to look like resolution. That ends now." In the back row, Olivia Bennett sat with her hands folded in her lap. Her new supervisor had told her, clearly and in writing, that her schedule, pay, and record were protected. Still, her stomach twisted when people glanced her way. Some looks were grateful, some were not. Truth has a cost, even when it wins. Across the room, one older mechanic stood after the meeting ended. He walked over to Olivia, removed his cap, and said, "My grandson is starting flight training next year. I hope he works with people who speak up like you did." Olivia did not know what to say, so she only nodded. That afternoon, Ethan signed the termination notice for Brooks Global's management agreement with Meridian Lux. The contract was worth millions every year. The decision was not made in anger. That made it heavier. David Morgan sat across from him in Ethan's Baltimore office, the city gray beyond the windows. "They accepted the audit," David said. "They accepted the training. They fired both employees. You could keep the contract and still call it a win." Ethan looked at the pen in his hand. "My mother used to clean hospital sheets for people who never learned her name," he said. "She taught me that respect is not a bonus. It is the floor. If a company needs a scandal to remember that, then they are not ready to carry my trust." He signed. One clean stroke, a quiet sound, a very loud consequence. News of the contract loss moved through the private aviation world faster than Meridian expected. Not as gossip at first, as a lesson. A major client had walked away not because of a mechanical failure, not because of cost, but because dignity had been treated as optional. Within weeks, other companies began reviewing their complaint procedures. Some did it out of conscience, some out of fear. Ethan didn't care which one opened the door, as long as the door opened. Melissa appealed her termination. The appeal failed. No criminal charges were filed, but the security report, the recording, and the witness statements followed her career like a shadow. She found work later outside aviation, far from private cabins and polished uniforms. Whether she changed, no one knew. Consequences can punish a person. Only honesty can transform one. Olivia left Meridian 6 months later, not because she was forced out, but because a better offer came. The new company hired her as a lead attendant and asked her to help design training on passenger dignity and crew responsibility. On her first day, she stood in front of a small group of new hires, hands trembling just a little. Rules matter, she told them. Safety matters. But never confuse authority with superiority. The person in front of you is still a person. Ethan kept flying in hoodies. He still carried his own bag. He still thanked people by name. He still watched closely when someone's smile changed after seeing his face. But something in him had softened too. Not toward injustice. Toward the people brave enough to interrupt it. 1 year after the incident, Brooks Global launched a legal support fund for service workers and customers facing discrimination in travel, hospitality, and healthcare. Ethan did not hold a press conference. He did not want applause. He wanted the next person to have more than their word against someone else's uniform. In his only interview, he said, "The lesson is not that I owned the plane. The lesson is that I should not have needed to own it to be treated with respect." Then he went quiet again. Because the story was never only about him. It was about every person who has been questioned in a place they earned. Every person who stayed calm because anger would be used against them. Every witness who felt fear rise in their chest and still chose to speak. And maybe that is where justice really begins. Not in the punishment, not in the headlines, but in the moment one person decides that someone else's dignity is worth defending. If this story stayed with you, share your thoughts. What would you have done in that cabin? And if you have ever seen someone being treated like they did not belong, maybe the next voice that changes everything will be yours.